So the United States is not paying attention to Africa enough. Africa's youth bulge is a geopolitical game changer. By 2050, the continent's working age population will hit 1.3 billion, surpassing China and India to become the world's largest labor pool. This isn't just a number, it's untapped potential. With the right investments, Africa could see GDP growth of 5 to 6% annually, fueled by a young, dynamic workforce driving innovation and industry. The continent's wealth possibilities are a staggering $6.3 trillion in natural resources like cobalt, copper, and oil, remaining largely untapped, alongside a consumer market projected to reach 2.5 trillion in just the next 5 years. But this potential isn't automatic. It hinges on who invests and how. China's Belt and Road Initiative has pumped $150 billion into African infrastructure since 2013. Projects like Kenya's Mombasa-Nairobi Railway, which is $3.6 billion, and Ethiopia's Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway, which is $4 billion, have created jobs for African youth while locking in resources for China. The downside, though, is debt trap diplomacy. Zambia owes 30% of its external debt to China, and Djibouti's debt to Beijing exceeds 20% of its GDP alone. Default risks loom. Just ask Sri Lanka, who lost its Hambantota port to China in 2017 under similar pressures. And African nations could face asset seizures too. Some are wising up though. Ethiopia has renegotiated its loans in 2018. Other countries have flat out rejected Chinese offers, but Chinese cash remains hard to ignore. Meanwhile, the US is fumbling the ball here. USAID funding to Africa has crashed since Trump took office from $8.7 billion to nearly zero, ceding ground to China and Russia. China's own clock is ticking as well, though. By 2050, its working age population will shrink by 200 million from 990 million to just 790 million, thanks to the one-child policy's long shadow. Meanwhile, and frankly, this is probably their biggest problem, China's elderly population will double to 400 million, which is absolutely going to strain its economy. This demographic crisis is going to kneecap China's ability to sustain labor-intensive projects in places like Africa. So it might try to pivot to high-tech investments like 5G networks or automated mining, reducing its reliance on its shrinking workforce. And yes, this could open the door for African youth to take those roles once filled by Chinese workers. But if funding slows because of the consumer crash that's coming for China, especially with their demographic decline, development will likely stall, and it can create a vacuum that the United States should be ready to fill. There's also South America. Their strategic weight is undeniable, yet the US has ignored them since Obama's first term. Historically, the Monroe Doctrine kept the region in America's orbit, but today China is muscling in. Brazil's soybean exports to China hit 40 billion in 2022, and Chile's lithium, which is vital for electric vehicles, flows to Chinese factories, with their total exports valuing 7.5 billion. China built a $3 billion port project in Peru that is going to be one of their footholds in the South American Pacific. South America's untapped wealth is massive, $1 trillion in mineral reserves, and 20% of the global oil reserves lie there as well. They also are an agriculture powerhouse, with Brazil feeding many global markets. Again, China's shrinking workforce might shift its focus to less labor-heavy investments in South America, digital infrastructure, or automated mining, as I said before, potentially loosening its grip. But the US, with no demographic crisis looming and its working age population holding steady all the way through 2050, so long as we don't deport all of the young immigrants, has a golden opportunity to reclaim influence and become more powerful than ever. And China knows this, which is why they're trying to pivot rapidly in these areas to high-tech arenas such as semiconductors, AI, etc. But the problem for them is they don't hold the keys to this tech. It is the US, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, not China, that has this capability. China's trying to get it rapidly, but they're being left out more often than not, and that is hindering them. So this is once again the West's moment. The US and the EU could counter China by leveraging education, tech, and democratic values to win over Africa's youth and South American leaders. Initiatives like Prosper Africa and the European Union's Global Gateway have offered massive funding for alternatives to Chinese loans with fewer debt traps, more favorable terms, and a better in for the West to benefit from a booming Africa. But for the US and Europe, right now scale is the issue. While insidious, China's Belt and Road Initiative dwarfs these efforts. In Africa, $100 billion in annual infrastructure investment is needed through 2040. Currently, the investments coming from the United States and the European Union barely scratch that. China's demographic woes will stop its trajectory, but don't count it out. Its tech investments, including $10 billion in African 5G alone, will sustain influence despite fewer workers. Africa and South America are becoming arenas for competition. India, with its 1.4 billion strong population, half under 35, and the European European Union with historical ties to Africa can jump in too. The US must balance its focus, rebuilding South American ties while racing for Africa's youth. Isolationism, especially under Trump's Make America Great Again mindset, isn't an option here. We can have America first while working in Africa and South America to bolster the influence and economy of all involved. By 2050, Africa's 1.3 billion workers and South America's $1 trillion in resources will shape the world. And the race has already started. And America cannot afford to sit this one out.